As you can see in this video, there are certain words, the letter to the Hebrews. Those words are not written by an apostle. Those words are not written by Jesus. Those words are there simply for a heading. And you can see God's final word in his Son. Those words are not written by the writer of Hebrews. Those words are not. The words that are written are God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers in the prophets, in many portions and in many ways, in these last days has spoken to us. And you can see there's some italics and things. In Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom he also made the world. And he is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature, and upholds all things by the words of his power. God has not made purification for sins and sat down at anybody's right hand. Do you understand? God has not sat down at anyone's right hand. Whose power? When he had made purification for sins, this is the Son, Jesus, the high priest. He made purification for sins. He sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become so much better than the angels. Did you know that we, as sons of God, in the resurrection or the glorification that's going to take place, we're not going to be subject to Jesus. Angels will be subject to us that have been resurrected as Jesus has. And these will rule. These are not being ruled over by Christ. These are not being ruled over by Jesus. They will also be reigning with Jesus under the Majesty on high. And the Majesty will still be on high, having become as much better than the angels, to the extent that he has inherited a more excellent name than they. If you are in the resurrection, if God raises you and you are glorified as Jesus is, you are not going to be glorified to worship Jesus as if he were king. You can worship him as a king, but you better not worship him as if he's your father or your God. You will be making a fatal mistake, or you will have made a mistake. I don't know. If you're in the resurrection, you can't make a fatal mistake, but you can now. Today I have fathered you. Did you know Jesus was fathered the day Mary conceived? Jesus had a father. When Mary conceived a child, God became a father to a child that was going to be born through a woman. I will be a father to him, and he will be a son to me. And when he again brings the firstborn into the world, he says, let all the angels of God worship him. Are you an angel of God? Are you an angel of God? Or are you a son of God? What are you? Is Jesus your Father in heaven? Has Jesus been made your God in heaven? If you think Jesus is God in heaven, listen to these words. And regarding the angels, he says, look, right there. He makes his angels winds and his ministers a flame of fire. But regarding the Son, he says, your throne, O God, is forever and ever, and the scepter of righteousness is the scepter of his kingdom. Yes, his kingdom, because he will be the king. I won't be the king over his kingdom. I don't want to be the king over his kingdom. I want to be a son of God and see what God does with me. What are you? Have you what? You have loved righteousness. Who loved righteousness? Jesus or God? And hated lawlessness. Jesus did love righteousness, and he didn't like lawlessness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you. Who has anointed you? Have you been anointed by Jesus? Let me ask you that question. Has Jesus anointed you? Or has God anointed you? I want to know who has anointed you. If you think Jesus has anointed you, I think you're going to find out that that's not what the high priest in heaven does. Jesus is high priest in heaven. There are some things that's going to happen. Did you know it? Did you know some things? God is bringing about some things. You think that the children that are born to be brothers and sisters of Jesus are being born so he can be ruler over them, and he can, I hope you don't hold that idea. Like a garment, what does it say? The heavens are the works of your hands. Do you think the heavens are the works of Jesus' hands? Do you really think that the heavens are the works of Jesus' hands? You are the same, and your years will not come to an end. Whose years won't come to an end? Whose years won't come to an end? The one who spoke to the angels. To which of the angels has he ever said, sit at my right hand until I make a footstool for your feet? Huh? Who was told to sit at his right hand? And now you think that because he is seated at the right hand, that God has lost any power to rule in his kingdom? Do you really think that? Will you inherit salvation? You think you've already inherited salvation? You haven't inherited anything. You have not inherited salvation. For this reason, we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, so that we do not drift away from it. For if the word spoken through angels proved unalterable, and every violation and act of disobedience received a just punishment, how will we escape if we neglect so great a salvation? After it was at first spoken through the Lord, it was affirmed to us by those who heard. God also testifying with both signs and wonders. Jesus isn't doing the signs and wonders today, folks. You think Jesus is doing the signs and wonders today? I hope you don't believe that foolishness. It's not Jesus doing the wonders and signs today. God also testifying with them by signs and wonders, and by various miracles, and by gifts of the Holy Spirit, according to his own will. Whose will? You think God's checking with Jesus? He did not subject to angels the world to come, which we are speaking, but someone has testified somewhere saying, what is man that you think of him? Or a son of man that you are concerned about him? Do you not know? Do you not know? You have made him for a little while lower than the angels, and crowned him with glory and honor. You have put everything in subjection under his feet. Whose feet are things going to be subjected to? Can you read? Can you read? For in subjecting all things to him, he left nothing that is not subject to him. But now we do not yet see all things subjected to him. I want to know who the him is you think this is. Do you think this him is Jesus? I tell you it isn't. It is to man. God gave everything on this earth to Noah and his offspring. And we are the offspring, and we will, by the grace of God, rule on this earth. Who was made a little while lower than the angels? That does not mean that Jesus came from heaven and was made something. Jesus, because of his suffering, death, crowned with glory and honor, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. It was fitting. It was. He who, what? Do you see it? Both he who sanctifies and those who are sanctified are from one. Jesus is not sanctifying you or me. You think Jesus is sanctifying you? If you do, you are deceived. Whose name did Jesus proclaim? Whose name did he proclaim? I will proclaim your name to my brothers. In the midst of the assembly, I will sing your praise. And I will put my trust in him. And again, behold, I and the children whom God has given me. What does it say? Therefore, since the children share in flesh and blood, don't get the idea that God has become flesh and blood, folks. If you do, you are deceived. He did what? Jesus, through death, might destroy the one who has the power of death. That is the devil. Who overcomes the devil? Jesus did by what? Being obedient to God. If Cain had not killed Abel, things would have gone better. But Cain knew that he was not supposed to kill his brother, but he did. Who got cursed? Who got cursed for killing Cain? Who got cursed for killing Abel? Do you think I've been cursed for Cain's killing of Abel? No. For clearly he does not give help to angels, but he gives helps to the descendants of Abraham. Was Jesus a descendant of Abraham? Has Jesus given anything to Abraham? Has Jesus made any promise to Abraham? No. Therefore, in all things, he had to be made like his brothers, that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God. A merciful and faithful high priest is not to be worshipped as if he's God. Do you understand or not? Do you? To make propitiation for the sins of the people. Since he himself was tempted in that which he has suffered, he is able to come to the aid of those who are tempted. Look here. Therefore, holy brothers and sisters in this book, and as you know, that was not in the original writing, partakers of a heavenly calling, consider the apostle and high priest of our confession, Jesus. Do you consider Jesus the apostle and high priest of your confession or not? Do you? If you don't, you should. You don't worship the high priest as if he's God. And if you worshiping Jesus and thinking he is God, that he is your Father in heaven, and that he gives good things to you, then you haven't heard a word that Jesus said by the Spirit of God that was in him. The builder of all things is God. Do you know who God is? It's not Jesus. The builder of all things is God. Who are you going to be faithful to? Are you going to be faithful to God or not? Or are you going to be faithful to some other entity other than God? If you do, you will be making a mistake, the consequence of which I don't know what it will be. But I do know for sure what it says right here. Therefore, just as the Holy Spirit says, do you think Jesus is the Holy Spirit? Do you really think Jesus is the Holy Spirit? Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts, as when they provoked me, as on the day of trial in the wilderness. Do you think the people were provoking Jesus? Do you think Moses brought the people out of Egypt to worship Jesus? Do you really? Do you really think that? Oh, where your fathers put me to the test. They didn't put Jesus to the test and saw my works for 40 years. They didn't see Jesus' works for 40 years. Therefore, I was angry with this generation. Jesus wasn't angry with that generation, was he? And said, they always go astray in their heart, and they do not know my ways. As I swore in my anger, they certainly shall not enter my rest. What does that mean? If you think that you are and have obtained salvation, if you really think that, I don't know why. Because salvation is going to come when the Lord of heaven and earth sends Jesus to the earth, where he will rule, and Daniel will be ruling with him, but God will still be on the throne in heaven. Take care, brothers and sisters, that there will not be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart that falls away from the living God. You think that's referencing Jesus, the high priest in heaven, the apostle and high priest? You are wrong. Encourage one another as every day, as long as it is today, so that none of you will be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. For we have become partakers of Christ if we keep the beginning of our what? Our commitment firm until the end. While it is said, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts, as they when they provoke me. Do you think the high priest in heaven is speaking to people on the earth today? Do you really think that the high priest in heaven, the apostle and high priest, is in heaven today with our Father? Do you understand anything that I am saying? Do you or don't you? I kind of have the idea that you probably don't. If you think that I, for 1 minute, am going to worship my brother as if he were God, you did not listen to these words that I have in this video. I will not worship Jesus as if he were God. And my brother, I'm calling Jesus my brother. Who do you call your father? That's the question. Who is your Father in heaven?